Hello, and I am Commissioner Jessica Campbell-Swanson, and welcome to our Arapahoe County's installment of Conversations with a Commissioner here in District 2. I am going to share this post onto my Facebook real fast so that folks on my Facebook can access it easily, and now I see myself doing that in a video, which is very awkward, so we're going to just do this real fast. We are live now. Excellent. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Well, hi. Thank you all for being here. I am your new commissioner for Commissioner District 2 in Arapahoe County. We cover Centennial, Greenwood Village, a little bit of Aurora, and a large chunk of, well, for me, of Arapahoe, of unincorporated Arapahoe County. A third of my residents of us live in unincorporated Arapahoe, and so I am excited to have been elected in November. This is my first town hall, so thanks for being here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, we've got 4 different topics. So we'll start with County 101. I wanted to lay a foundation and groundwork for kind of the work we do. Not a lot of people will understand what county commissioners do and what the county does. It is kind of sits in an interesting middle place of government, and then how we spend our time and just what our work is, that foundation of that. And then we'll go into county priorities and focus areas, the things that we're working on this week or this year and moving forward. A year does feel like a week in the county, I will tell you. And then we've got state legislative session and what that meant for the county and how we advocate for our residents' needs and for the county needs at the state level. And then district-specific update. So what I'm going to do is if I say something that you don't understand or you need me to just repeat, feel free to kind of have me do that and ask a question. But substantive questions of, hey, what's the county doing about this, or what about this, or did the county have a position on this bill? I'll do question time at the end of each section. So we've booked this out to go till 7:30, but if we go through faster, that's great, but it might take that long, so we're going to try to keep moving on because I have a lot of information. Moving forward, town halls will be moving across the district from west to east, so we get good, equitable geographic distribution there, and we'll do these once a quarter. And so this is the first one. We got a lot of information because it includes legislative session and update, but at the end, I want to ask you all what kind of topics you would like to hear about in upcoming town halls. We can go into depth. We can get what are we doing about in our response to increasing number of our unhoused neighbors. How are we responding to XYZ? We can talk about all sorts of stuff in depth. And we have incredible experts at the county who have been doing this work for a very long time and can bring them in as well. And so we'll talk about that at the end. So let's carry on. So this is our agenda. So here we go. County 101. So counties sit in this interesting middle space where we are the implementers of state policy. So the state legislature makes policy and then we implement the programs. We are in the Constitution only allowed to do the things that they say that we can or cannot do, right? As we say in the county, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away sometimes with the state legislature, and that's our job. We do a lot of programs. I'll get into more of that as we go on, but we're a subdivision of the state. We have 5 county commissioners in 5 separate districts. We are elected from those districts. They have alternating elections. So in 22, my district, District 2 was up, as well as District 4 in Aurora. That's Commissioner Summy. So we replaced the 2 Nancys that had been on, and that's not, I don't mean that derogatorily. We're both Nancy. So they were fantastic, incredible commissioners, and they termed out, and so we were both up in 2022. In 2024, districts 1, 3, and 5 will be up. So 1 is that the western part of the county, Littleton, Sheridan, Inglewood, that has Commissioner Warren Gully in representing that. She is our chair. And then District 3 is Jeff Baker. And on most maps, when you make maps of the county, we kind of do the urban area, and then there's the rest of the county, and that's District 3. It's all the rural bits. And then District 5 is Commissioner Bill Holen, and he is in year 10 of his service on the county Board of County Commissioners, and he's term limited, and his seat is up in 2024, and he represents that northern Aurora bit before where we get capped at Colfax, and then north of Colfax is Adams County, but he represents that whole area. So we also have running the county 6 different offices, assessor, clerk, recorder, coroner, district attorney, sheriff, and treasurer, and I'll talk about them more later. So this is how we're all organized. So with our separate elected offices, they are lateral to us. But the county commission the Board of County Commissioners is in charge of the budget, and so that all funnels through us is the budget. Then we have our departments, county attorney, Board of Public Health, and then the Department of Public Health is under us. But they have a Board of Health, which, if you remember, during fun times over the last couple of years, we were part of Tri-County Health, and then Douglas County, for a variety of reasons, decided to secede from the union, so to say. And then we weren't able to really figure something out with Adams County to be kind of a two-pack, so we are now a wolf pack of 1. And we've got our public health department that just launched January of this year, and they've been doing incredible work to stand that up. Then we have all the rest of our other departments, and I'm about to go into those. So, here's everything we do. So our assessor is in charge of evaluating your property assessments. If you own a home, which is awesome if you do, then you probably got your property valuation for this year. I think in Arapahoe County, evaluations were somewhere in the 30 to 40%. So that was a lot for folks. I've got something later down in district updates of the website. I mean, just go to the assessor's website, and he has a nice link on there for you to get instructions to protest your property tax value, your property valuations. A lot of people are doing that. The window is open until June 8th. We'll get there later. But that's what they do. The clerk and recorder, elections, DMV, passports, records, marriage license, all of that. That is headed up. Oh, and our assessor is PK Kaiser, was just re-elected to his second term in 22. Our clerk and recorder is Joan Lopez. She was a longtime clerk at the DMV and just got re-elected to her second term. Commissioner's office, our director is Michelle Halstead, and they kind of do a lot of quarterbacking and coordinating, helping with our communications, kind of setting agendas, just making sure that the commissioners, honestly, that we know where we're going and we're at places on time, or as close to on time as possible in my case. The community resources is our director is Kathy Smith, and she's fantastic, and they really work with a lot of our most vulnerable populations. So they've got our Workforce Development Center, AD Works. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's an incredible partnership that we have with Douglas County and does workforce development. We work not only with prospective employees, but also small and large businesses to help them reach prospective employees. They can give scholarships for certifications, for trainings, different things through that. We do rental assistance, community development. We've got community block grants that help with capital projects on helping with community projects. And then community corrections, and that's working with our DA's office and law enforcement on diversion programs and trying to help people either not go to jail or re-enter back into society after some time of detainment. Then, like I said, pretrial services on there, weatherization is on there, and that is really working with our senior our elderly folks, our more tenured residents. And then Veterans Affairs, and then again, senior resources are there as well. And so community resources does a lot of work and working with eviction prevention and legal defense and all that, just working with our most vulnerable populations. Coroner that's when our life has ended. Not everybody goes to the coroner. If we know that you kind of pretty up and down of why somebody died, then they don't go to the coroner, but particularly for investigations, and most relevantly during the pandemic, which is still going, but whatever, during the pandemic and with our fentanyl and opioid crisis, our coroner has been very pivotal in helping us track deaths, understand what's going on. The coroner was just before the board this week looking for approval to apply for a grant to get extra dollars for drug testing panels. The cheaper panels test for fentanyl, but they don't test for xylazine, which is a new drug that's is getting out into community, and it's basically a horse tranquilizer, and it's being cut with fentanyl, heroin, and coke, and is really messing people up. So an expanded panel, getting that grant would give her funds to get expanded panels so we can test for a wider variety of drugs that are going through our community. So our coroner is Dr. Kelly Lear. She's incredible and an absolute godsend to the county in terms of being a regional, state, and national expert in what she does. Facilities and fleet management, buildings and cars and roads is pretty kind of in the name. Patrick O'Neill is our director there. He's doing incredible work, especially in looking at LEED certification, sustainability, EV, adding electric vehicles to our fleet, and they're part of also working with open spaces and public works to change some of our grasses, which are not native, to native grasses, so also working on saving water. And so he's been amazing on all of that. Finance, that's the money, and that's our director is Todd Weaver. And not only is that department in charge of all finances, management, making sure that we are tracking protocol and accounting and all of that, but also performance management. And we used to have a separate department that was strategy and performance management. That disbanded because we did some work there, and then it was kind of like, okay, now we just need to track. So that is now under finance, as all money kind of performance data flows through there in a kind of logical way. Human resources, right? I would say, so we've got Patrick Hernandez is our director for human services, and we just hired our new DEI division manager. And so we've done a study, and now Sam Borrego, pronouns she, her, she's going to be in charge of getting all the recommendations for DEI implemented throughout the county. And she's been meeting with commissioners and meeting with department directors to get that information and to see where they are in the process, what they're thinking about, so that we can make those implementations through the county. And that's not only for our internal work, but also how our staff, when they are out in community, are working with community. As we know, Arapahoe is one of the most diverse counties, if not the most diverse county in the state, one of the most. And so how we interact with our diverse populations and make them feel welcome and included and connected is really important in the level of service and quality of service that we are aim to give in the county. So that human resources, they do all this stuff. I will also say our human resources in charge of our benefits, and they have done incredible work on something that's very important to me, mental health. They don't even call it mental health, they call it brain health, because it really is about, taking away the stigma of this ephemeral mental health and making it really is about what our brains, our bodies are going through. And I'm really impressed with the work that they've done there in terms of training, trauma-informed responses, and how we think about people as whole people and take care of them as an employer and being a model of that. Human services is, child and adult protective services, that SNAP, TANF programs, Medicaid. We'll talk more about them in terms of focuses of what the county is working on later, and then child support services. There is still more. So we also do open space. It's just CSU Extension. So our CSU Extension program has such a bevy of things that it offers. They do beekeeping, gardening. You can learn how to be a master gardener. They do recipes. They do all sorts of community programs. That is something I feel like when we did onboarding, Commissioner Summy and I were new, so we onboarded with all the different departments and offices. And the CSU Extension program was one of just like, okay, if I don't get reelected, I'm going to go work at the CSU Extension because it's very, very cool. That's actually a joke because I will go work for PWD probably if I don't get reelected, but that's different. We'll get there. So the fairgrounds, they're working with the Highline Canal. Snow removal is open space, but it's also public works and development too. We'll get there. Traffic signal management, I think, is actually public works and development too, but there's a lot of cross-section of the work that happens in the county. Our sheriff is the sheriff in charge of law enforcement and keeping us safe. Law enforcement has been such a hot topic in the last decade, history of this country, but I am really proud of the job that we do in Arapahoe County. We are top 36 in the country, and I don't mean 36%. I mean as an actual top 36%. We are one of the only counties in the state who has been and in the nation who has had a 4-tier. There are 4 different accreditation levels, and we have got 3, and we've gotten them for 4 administrations in a row. Our Sheriff's Department has been working on increasing our budget for mental health co-responders. They were and not even co-responders, first responders. So we're sending mental health professionals for calls first and unaccompanied by an armed deputy. If things are escalating, they can call in for backup, but that has been something that's been really important to Sheriff Brown. They've also been getting dollars for and increasing our therapy puppies in schools, which sounds kind of fluffy, but is actually very legit when you think about the trauma that our school-aged residents have been going through and everything that's against them in terms of mass shootings, mental health, all sorts of stuff. The reintegrating after being out of school physically for COVID and then reintegrating in, having those therapy dogs there has been huge in helping people return to the classroom and de-escalate even in the classroom. So very proud of the work that's being done there. There's more, but this isn't the Sheriff's Town Hall. So public health, as I said, we just launched our own department. And we're going to starting with some basics as of now, and then that program will grow. So we've got prenatal and maternal care, health education promotion, immunizations, and restaurant inspections. So when we think about public health departments, it's not a medical care provider. It's more about prevention in society so that you don't need a medical care provider. One of the biggest things that's going on with public health is that we completed our public health assessment. Then the next phase, which will go into next year, is the public health improvement plan. And that's when we talk about, okay, what is the department really going to do to address our known mental health needs, to address social determinants of health, to our air quality, water, all the things that go into a healthy society. So how will we do that? Public Works and Development is my favorite department. Don't tell finance, but they literally build the world that we live in. And I'm not just saying that just because our Public Works Director is here, but it's something we liaise. I'll get into liaisons and all of that in a second, but as county commissioners, we liaise with different departments, and I specifically went after Public Works and Development because it's the world that it creates the world that we live in, from our roads to land use, environment, energy policy, animal control, all of this different stuff, building permits, planning, all of the different things that go into making our society what it is. Public Works and Development does the conceptual as well as the literal physical building of the work with our roads and bridge crews. So that is, we touch everything in the county. And so I'll show you more of what we even do outside of just our own internal work. But that's literally people I'd come to the doors, you knock doors and people are like, okay, well, what matters to you? And they're like, oh, I don't know what the county, and it's like anything. What's going on in your life, and we touch on it. So as I say, from birth to earth is kind of how everything the county touches. So county commissioners are functions. I particularly do not like this photo, but I got outvoted because apparently somebody had their eyes closed in the one that I liked, but it's okay. Anyway, so here's what we really do is we're the CEOs of the county in a lot of ways, as well as policymakers. We're your city council for unincorporated areas, but we direct everything that happens in terms of the strategic and the policy vision and the goals. There's a whole list here everybody can read, but there's a little bit of policy making and ordinances, a lot of policy making in terms of budget. As we know, budgets are values documents. We'll talk about our budget here in a second. But really, we work together as a team to make the dream work, right? Teamwork makes the dream work. So again, everybody, we can kind of read here. But we advocate for the county as well, and on regional and different boards, statewide boards, national boards. We cooperate and work and build intergovernmental relationships with our city councils, which are huge partners on regional projects. And it's kind of amazing, like that there, even seeing it listed out doesn't really capture the intensity of this job. So I think, do I have okay, this is what our day-to-day looks like. So, from Mondays and Tuesdays, we are back-to-back in meetings from anywhere from 8 a.m. till 4 or 5 p.m. And it can be anywhere from, gosh, if I can think, yesterday we talked about economic financial incentives, oil and gas, migrants, the coroner's grant request. We can cover easily 10 topics in one day sometimes, and we have to be able to pivot and jump. Sometimes they're 15-minute conversations, sometimes they're 2-hour conversations, and they cover everything. And so I think what I have learned so far is what makes a really great commissioner is being well-read, studied up on what's happening, and being present. And so I put, much to the chagrin of friends and family, as well as sometimes constituents or others, but I put my phones on Do Not Disturb, and I sit and focus and try to really be present with the information that I'm receiving. So asking important questions, because largely we are decision makers. And so whether we fund this project or this, whether we direct negotiations to go in this way or that way, whether we want to build this over here or over there, whether we're updating our land use code, our oil and gas regs, financial incentive, mental health, all the kind of things, we're making those decisions. And so to me, it's very important to have as much information as I can going in, and then being present and thoughtful as we're having those conversations. So we meet with our constituents. Some of these blocks are me trying to find time just to study and do emails. So we've got a hot topic in our district, which I'll get to, is Centennial Airport and some of the changes that have been happening there and how we're going to respond to that. Of all the things, I didn't really talk about my background, but I've done environmental law, election law, housing, healthcare reform policy, a whole slew of different things. Never got around to airport law. So I have been trying to figure out and catch up so that I can weigh in and advocate for my constituents and residents as best as possible. So, but I literally have to elbow out and square off and block off time where I can just sit and read and even catch up on emails. And so it's a real, is it Prometheus where the guy with the rock rolls down the hill? That's sort of my email inbox is. Or like I've also called it a hydra, is like I send an email and get it out and then 2 more come back. And so if you ever do see an email signature from me that just says, please do not respond to emails, then that's what's going on, as I'm trying to say, just please. But because it's nuts and it gives me a lot of anxiety. So, I want to make sure I'm being responsive to our residents as much as possible. Every other week on Tuesdays, we have our formal business meetings. So we have a couple different kinds of sessions and meetings that we have. Some are administrative. We're coordinating as a team. On Monday mornings, we do what I call show and tell, but it's share time. But it's like, what did you do last week? Because we all go out into community and serve on all these different boards, and then we need to make sure that we're in sync because there's so much overlapping cross-section and intersection with the projects that we're working on. So Monday mornings we come and do that. We go through calendar. So we've got administrative meetings, and those are sometimes what's the timeline for this project, or how do we kind of coordinate? We're not really making policy or substantive decisions, just sort of strategic or timeline process decisions, just coordinating really. We have study sessions where decisions can be made of whether we want to allow, and it seems odd because these are other elected officials, but because we're constitutionally in charge of the budget, they do have to come to us, say, hey, can we apply for this $100,000 grant? Because that may have ramifications for other departments like IT or human services, or it might be an FTE that is a full-time employee who's grant funded for this 1 or 2 year grant program. But then they're either going to get fired or the grant will get renewed, or we have to figure out in our budget a way to pay for that employee going forward, even if the grant ends. So there's a lot that comes before us. Those are study sessions. Study sessions can cover things like which regs are we going to look at and examine, preliminary approval for programs, for all sorts of stuff that then will come before us in business meetings. And the business meetings are what we have every other Tuesday. And that's when we sit on the dais and are all fancy and official and make formal decisions on regs and all that kind of stuff. So, gonna try to keep us moving. So these are all the boards I sit on. So when we all got elected, we came together, we did some onboarding, and then we divvied up. What do you want to sit? What makes sense? So some of these, like the public airport, I sit on that, not because I'm a pilot or particularly care about airports, but because it's in my district. So sometimes decisions are made geographically, same with Aqua, the wastewater authority, or SIMSWA, both of those are in my district. So geographically I sit there. We all sit on a different water authority board as is pertinent to geographically where we're located. But then some things we sit on because it's what we care about. So I fought or argued to be on our homeless coordinating committee. That's something that I've worked on for almost a decade, and it's something very important to me, and so wanted to be our voice and represent on that committee. Different things. So CCAT and CCI will get together. Those are consortiums of counties that then advocate at the state level. Denver South is a macroeconomic development for the I-25 corridor. So that's my district, so I sit on that. It's very interesting to be on that board. MAC is so separate from CCI and Colorado counties, or CCAT and CCI. MAC includes Denver, which these other two don't really include. And that's that. NACO is the National Association of Counties. I signed up to be on that committee because I first and foremost worked to be appointed and selected by my peers, by my fellow commissioners, to our executive budget committee. When I first started even thinking about running for office, I started hearing about how tight the Arapahoe County budget was, and that how we've been making magic happen for a very long time and squeezing, $1.50 out of every dollar, but now it's like, oh, we need $3. And so to me, if we're looking at, a really strained budget as well as a number of competing priorities, getting that inside information on the Executive Budget Committee was very important to me. So as I noted, we also liaise with different departments. So because I'm on the Executive Budget Committee and new, they were like, you get to be on finance so that you can have that extra touch point. Hello, hi, come on in. And then I also liaise with Public Works and Development, which is housing, environment, a whole lot of the reasons I ran, a whole lot of the reasons I do the work that I do even before being a commissioner. So, we sit on all of these. So we have Mondays and Tuesdays where we are full on at the county working internally. And then they send us out into the wild Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we sit on these committees. Commissioner Summy and I in particular coming on, I've had a lot of people go like, oh, how's it been? And when they say like, oh, you're drinking from the fire hose, I get sometimes different images in my head. You see sometimes images of like a protester in the fire and they're like standing there. And then sometimes you see them and they're like splayed out on the ground, totally getting the business beat out of them. There's variations of that. So not only being a new commissioner did everything take long because we're learning a lot, but we onboarded with every single department and office that I listed, as well as multiple different of the boards, and had legislative session. And so as I discussed, we are very tied to what the state legislature is doing. And so being there advocating for the county and our residents of what's happening in the legislature and our perspective of our budget and how we actually implement the programs, because we're not a different team, we're just a different part of the same team, right? And so having that was huge. And CCAT and CCI would have all-day meetings where you're meeting with people from all across the state to talk about policy. And so it's been an incredibly crazy, wild, busy 4 months. And it's been really amazing to learn as much as I can as quickly as possible. And I feel like sometimes I'm still kind of skipping across the surface, but have also been really blessed to have directors who will take extra time to sit and give us extra tutoring sessions and education sessions on things. So it's, been trying to catch up as quickly as possible. All right, our county budget. Here's a nice piece. So we have an almost $500 million budget. Half of it comes from property taxes. Half of it comes from grants, federal and state grants. So, and some of those are competitive that we apply for, and then some of them are programmatic, especially in human services. There's certain grants that are sort of mandated through statute, right? So we don't have to apply and compete for those regularly, but we are dependent on those dollars, right? So what's very interesting is I think people in community know that we do get most of our budget from property taxes. However, people don't realize that the bulk of those property taxes that are being collected are actually going to special districts and school districts. So if you are part of a metro district in your neighborhood, they sometimes they have huge number of mills that crush what we are actually getting. So we actually only get about $430 per home. We also in the county are not debruced. So what that means in Tabor, so Colorado is very unique. We have Tabor, Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And one of the things that it does is you make an estimation of your revenue. And anything that exceeds what that estimated revenue was meant to be, you have to remit. If you are not debruced, you remit those dollars to your residents. So there are, I think it's estimated $43 million that we basically not left on the table. In some ways it is very much your money, but because property valuations went above what they were estimated to be in 2022, we have to turn that money back over, and that's money that we don't get to keep, even though it's still technically within our mills, but it is because valuations were higher, then we don't get that money. And so we are one of 13 counties of 64 in the state that have not debruised, so that is an extra strain on our budget. We also have not passed a sales tax, new sales tax for 20 years. And yet during that time, we have grown exponentially. Demands and needs are high. So when I was told, okay, our budget is really strained, like, they are not joking around. And so the county works on what's called a baseline budget process, which means that what your budget was last year is the same as this year, and you got to argue for why you need more money. We used to do a 4% automatic rate kind of increase for each budget, but in 2006, long before I was making decisions for the county, they decided to move to baseline budgeting. And so the baselines for our department and office budgets have been the same since 2006. Which is kind of wild to me. But that's where we make magic happen at the county. I think we've been incredibly good stewards of our dollars and really make things stretch. And we also happen to be blessed with incredible staff who will stretch themselves and hold themselves to a high quality level of service to make those things happen. We'll get to collective bargaining and taking care of staff in a little bit. But this is kind of small here, but you'll see it's not surprising. But you'll see I'm going to try something if this is oh, yeah. Okay, Sheriff's Office, they are expensive friends to have. And so they take up the lion's share of the budget. The next largest is Human Services, which is good. Let's take care of folks. And we do have a lot of need. But then you can kind of see everything else gets kind of sliced up in here. The next big bucket is admin, and that's our salaries and benefits and how we take care of folks. And I will tell you all that when I was onboarding and learning about our benefits packages, we've had stuff going on in our family where money's been tight. I think money's tight for a lot of people. But as I was learning, and I've been my own boss, I've had my own consulting firm for a while, and coming into this job and seeing, insurance and pay into the retirement and this benefit, and like, you can just go see a therapist anytime you need, I literally teared up 3 times during the session. And it just is, I think we do our best to take care of our employees in terms of our benefits. There's a lot of different ways to structure that, but in terms of salary and benefits, we try to be as competitive as we can with the budget that we have and honor people. And we'll continue to look at the equity and total compensation and how we do that as we move forward. But that is that. And then, so that is that. That's County 101. Does anybody have questions just about the basic stuff of how the county works? No? Cool. All right. Well, Civics 101. Everybody gets an A. Let's go. Okay. I'm going to get a little water. I will remind people there are cookies and water over there if anybody wants some. And now we're going to move into county priorities and focus areas. Yeah, you got, this is Tom. I met Tom. He is one of our residents affected by some of the changes that have happened at the airport. So you'll miss that, but you hear from me about the airport all the time. So, but thanks for being here.
I just want to say thank you very much. You're an extraordinary advocate for the people of this district.
Thanks.
And really diligent, so hardworking. So thank you very much.
Thanks. I did not pay him to say that. So that's, yeah. Thanks, Tom. Have a good one. See ya. All right, county priority. So these first are things that are just happening this year. So another picture of kind of what the county is working on. Try to breeze through these top lines. As I said, I'll pause for questions at the end. So if anybody wants to know a little bit more, we can go back to this slide and I can dig a little deeper on something. Or I can also, Chris is back there with our comms office, and we can get you connected to get deeper, more information if you want. So transition to single county judicial district. So we are right now JD 18. It is the is/was the largest judicial district. It covered Lincoln, Elbert, Douglas, and Arapahoe counties. On the ballot, our state legislators referred something to the ballot because, as we know in Colorado, to change anything that is in the Colorado Constitution has to go on the ballot. So that got referred last year. And our residents did vote to separate the two districts. So Lincoln, Elbert, and Douglas County will be Judicial District 23, and Arapahoe County will stay Judicial District 18. So we have to now separate all of the staff, employees, casework, benefits, people's insurance, computers, phone lines. I mean, the whole, from kind of big picture stuff to very minutia, we've got teams that are working on splitting that up. That goes into effect in 2025, but will be reflective on your 2024 ballots. So in 2024, we will have an election for our new JD18 DA, and that will be just for Arapahoe County. So you've got people working on that. Coincidentally, because we had to separate from Tri-County Health and do all that dissolution, we've got a team, and this is not our first time at this particular rodeo. So making that work and making sure, in particular, that attorneys who, A, live in particular counties, and B, have been working on particular cases can stay in line with that as much as possible and have that harmony, as well as making sure their retirement benefit, all the kind of things that they've been paying into are included and compensated going forward. ARPA. So ARPA is the America Relief Plan Act that came out of Rona time from the federal government dollars. We have to allocate all of those dollars by the end of 2024 and spend them by the end of 26. So we are using, those are all one-time dollars that the county has used to, respond to the actual pandemic and the crises that were created and exposed, right? A lot of eviction prevention, homelessness programs, one-time kind of programs in that way, but then also capital programs, kind of being able to use those dollars because they're not sustainable. And so as we talked about grants and bringing on new FTEs, we've been thinking about these ARPA dollars the same way of we don't want to take on recurring costs when we know these dollars are one-time dollars. So we've really been looking and investing in school program, mental health programs, just a slew of different things. There's a whole page on our website all about that. I also have talking points about that if we want to get into that, but we obviously have a lot to cover, so I'm going to just keep moving. Refine and expand our homelessness mitigation programs, which is an interesting way of phrasing. And while I was looking at, do I want to reword that? It's really of the count. We have been really blessed in Arapahoe County that we haven't had a huge unhoused population for long. It's been growing. I think the programs and policies that we see in Denver has increased our unhoused population here. Aurora has had a population of unhoused folks for a minute, and they have been implementing programs, but we haven't really seen it in the Greenwood Village Centennial area in much in sizes enough that I think the county felt it really warranted a full task force and approach and all of that. And so we really don't have, in real honesty, fleshed out programs responding to how we take care of our unhoused neighbors. It is now something, unfortunately, that is becoming an increasing experience for folks, and we're responding. As I said, we have had programs using ARPA dollars and eviction prevention and all of that. It is obvious, not just from a humanitarian aspect, but from a efficient use of tax dollars. It is much cheaper to keep someone housed than to get them housed and healed after they've already become unhoused, right? Because there's a real tight negative feedback loop once you become unhoused. So we're firing that up. and we'll be looking at that. We've got an internal task force happening now. Then they will bring recommendations to the board, and then we will kind of point in the policy and vision of what do we want our response essentially to be. I will be very honest, for myself, I believe it is a housing first policies are what work best, with wraparound services and a continuum of care that address the root causes, as well as looking at the economic reasons in terms of wages, training, and access to housing. We'll talk about housing here in a little bit. That's obviously a massive topic here in the county. That is it to me. We have seen other governmental jurisdictions implement sweeps or camping bans. In my studies and in my experience, having worked in this area for almost a decade, I do not believe that they work. I believe that they are a massive waste of government funds, where you are, and I agree with jurisdictions and federal district courts who have found camping bans and sweeps in particular to be a violation of constitutional rights against the prohibition against torture. That's just me. And some other judges. That to me, we will see what our staff pulls together in terms of recommendations, and then the board will make some policy decisions on that. I think being in a strained budget, I will advocate that. I don't think just moving people around and throwing their stuff out is an efficient use of the small dollars that we have, because there's no end to that at a certain point. So, but we'll see what really makes sense there. And that is me as Commissioner District 2, not county policy yet. So we'll see where we land as a board. Implementation of the Regional Opioid Council Plan. So, massive lawsuit. We got a whole bunch of money from opioid dollars to respond to our opioid crisis. And I do not sit on that committee. Commissioner Summey and is it just commissioners? I think just Commissioner Summey, but maybe Baker Holin are on there too. And they're divvying up those dollars, looking at all the different impacts and causes for our opioid crisis, and how can we allocate funds to respond to that in an intelligent and sustainable way that really gets not only to addressing the consequences, but also what led to it in the first place. So very excited about that. Redistricting commissioner districts. It's 10 years. It's time. I think we should get the maps that are recommended from the Independent Redistricting Commission sometime in June. So it's very exciting. Commissioner Warren Gully and I sit on like half a mile of the line, so we'll see what comes before us, and that's part of why I'm not, I have one term. That's what I am emotionally invested in, and we'll see if I get districted out or not. I like my home. I'm not moving to stay in this job. So we'll see what happens. But whoever we have will be excellent if I get districted out. It'll be all right. New website to improve accessibility. So we're revamping our website. It's a little clunky. It's a little outdated, and we need to improve accessibility. Make it a little more user-friendly. There's also been a lot of legislation that's come out kind of mandating some of these changes. I think we were already in that process anyway, so that works out in the timing very well. DEI framework, I already talked about that a little bit. Continuing to build a formal relationship with the Arapaho tribe. We are on indigenous land that was colonized by our ancestors, and we as the county, even before I was here, created a formal relationship, acknowledging that and beginning to foster that relationship. And I'm really proud to be able to have the opportunity to build on that relationship and make sure that we are righting the wrongs of the past. So, complete land use code amendments to further advance affordable housing opportunities. We'll talk about that housing, see you, John, later. And that's a huge effort from our Public Works Department, and looking at how we can look at our land use code to address our shortage of affordable and attainable housing. Service delivery, geographic and digital perspective, that's kind of internal, just making sure we're doing a good job with your monies. And then our strategic plan, we'll talk about that. That's our next slides. And then stabilized funding sources, that's tied in with that stuff too. So obviously a lot going on at the county. So we'll move into our focus areas. So because we have a new board members, we did a strategic retreat, 3 days. It was awesome. We started just with the board on day 1. Then we folded in, like cheese, our elected officials. And then on day 3, folded in our directors. And because they're really incredible experts in the fields that they work in. And I believe very much, and I think the county believes in nothing about us without us. And so since they are the most direct implementers of a lot of the stuff, we wanted their perspective on the strategic focus. And we came out with 4 focus areas. 1 is housing. 2 is sustainable development, and these are not in any particular order. 2 is sustainable development, which we started with transportation, and then through conversation realized there's a lot that gets baked into that, and so kind of morphed into sustainable development. Workforce development, which has an internal and external component, and then the increasing revenue, and looking at so we know we don't have any money. How are we going to fix that, right? So housing. So here's just some stats on our needs. We were number 1 in evictions in the state in December 2022. That is not an award you want to win. We have the number of our unhoused neighbors has doubled in the last 2 years. They didn't do a proper point in time count for 2021 because of the pandemic, so we don't really have numbers. So we have 2020 and then 2022 numbers, and it doubled from that point. 30% of our residents are cost burdened. To be cost burdened means that you are spending more than 30% of your gross income on housing and utilities. You'll see some different definitions in there. I go with the HUD definition, which includes utilities, but you might hear it with or without utilities, but it's 30%. And so we have 30% of our residents that are cost burdened in that way. 50% of them are severely cost burdened, which means that they're spending more than 50% of their income on housing. We have some numbers that show people are spending up to 63% of their income on just having a place to live. So, and in some zip codes, we've done the math, and I think it was 80112 in particular that was called out for me. There is not a single house for sale or place to rent if you're at the 80 to even up to 120% AMI. So that is an incredible problem. And just so you know, at the 80% AMI, and I'll explain AMI here in just a second, but 80% AMI is making $66,000 a year. It's not nothing, right? 100% AMI for the county is around $87,000 a year. So if you're even making more than that, you're up, I think 120% AMI is like 97 or something like percent, or $97,000. So you're making quite a bit of money and still not being able to afford your housing, and that's clearly a problem, and leads to things like the first stat, right, of number of evictions, right? So here's what our goal is to increase access to affordable and attainable housing. So affordable and attainable are other also definitions that get thrown around. Affordable is applying, when we think about it separate than whether you can afford your home, and that's that 30%. Affordable housing pertains to folks at that 80% AMI and below, and attainable is 120% and below. And so since people can't afford housing even up at that 120% AMI, we felt that affordable and attainable housing were both targets to look at. So we are currently in the process of, I think, lining up our vendor who's going to do our housing needs assessment. You got to plan your work before you work your plan. You got to know what you need before you just start doing stuff. However, it's not like a lot of this stuff is totally new, some of the solutions. So we're updating our land use code to increase flexibility, density, multi-use development, mixed income developments, looking at all the kind of tools that we have in the housing toolbox for how we can increase access to housing. we also have a housing authority, which has been a little defunct for some years. Again, decisions were made before I was here, so I can't speak to those. But we've been looking at those of what kind of programs, what kind of grants, what kind of funding would we be able to get? Because we know that developers are interested in building projects that make them money. That they're corporations, that's their job, is they make money. That's not what our job is. Our job is to take care of people and make sure that we are building a society that works for everyone. And so we are starting to entertain ideas and put things into motion to look at how we can be more aggressive and proactive as a county in standing up our own housing and working and partnering and subsidizing housing. And so that's going to be huge too. Eviction prevention is an ongoing focus as we look at ARPA dollars, and kind of as some projects that we had maybe allocated dollars for are peeling off, we're going to continue to reallocate those dollars and can put some to eviction prevention. However, because there were ARPA dollars that funded a lot of our eviction prevention work, if we don't figure out the increased revenue situation, then that's on the chopping block for things that we may not be able to do moving forward. So that's giving me a lot of anxiety and heartburn. We also worked during the legislative session to advocate and lobby for policies that would give us greater control, permissive control, to play in the housing market. And so, as well as get access to different dollars and different policies that would help us increase housing and decrease costs. So next area, sustainable development. So we are at 655,000 people in the county now. We are projected to hit 800,000 people by 2030, which is wild. That growth has wear and tear on our environment, right? We don't try to ruin everything, but as humans, we just have a footprint, right? So we also are in severe non-attainment of our air quality standards and levels through the EPA. And we also have increasing demand on very few water resources. While it did rain sufficiently over the last couple days and last week, it is, we struggle with drought here in Colorado. So what are we looking to do so that we grow sustainably? We have our water study is in its first phase. They are now in the data compilation and gathering phase. That will wrap in the next couple months, and then in July we'll move to the supply and demand study. We are partnering with local other jurisdictions as well as Adams to kind of get a global look at that, kind of more regional, not just siloed. And if you missed the news, because I know everybody's looking for water study county news, we did make the move to say that we're going to look not just at 100-year floodplain, but 300 years, so that we're really looking into the future at what our needs are. Public engagement on that will start sometime around the summer, and so you can go to our website and figure that out if you want to nerd out with Director Weimer and me on water study stuff. So transportation master plan is another huge bit, right? How do we get ourselves out of everybody just being in single occupancy vehicles driving from here till the end of the world, right? So looking at micromobility, bikeability, walkability, public transit, looking at how we can get people moving around in ways that have less deleterious effects on our environment, right? Oil and gas reform is we've been having a conversation about how do we update our regs to make sure that they are reflective of the newest technologies and implementing value-added protections for not just human health, but environmental health. So from setbacks, we'll be having a big conversation around that, to air and water quality. We know that the state is looking at some stuff, so we'll be kind of working with them, as well as continuing monitoring, alerts for neighbors, just kind of looking at the whole process of what does this, again, and without moral judgment, but an inherently extractive and pollutive industry, but that our society depends on right now. How do we balance that out, that need versus the impact that that has, and how can we protect our human health and the environment as we transition away from non-sustainable energy sources, right? Because we aren't necessarily ready to just completely cut off oil and gas as a society, but what are the costs associated with continued work on oil and gas, and how do we start moving to renewable sources of energy? And those have an impact as well. So one of the studies we had recently was on solar and the trade-offs on that, right? The materials, they have to come, the mining that it takes for solar materials, the transportation of those materials from overseas, the impact that they have on just the surface of the land and our wildlife territories. So there's a lot of trade-offs with our energies. I also was just in a meeting earlier with SIMSWA, which is the Southwest Metro Water. It was water. And but we were talking, they got a study from the fire district about electric car batteries. And this is something that's going to fester, so brace yourselves. But basically, electric car batteries, there is not enough water to put out a fire in an electric vehicle battery. They can suppress it, you can drown it, and as soon as you take off the water, the battery itself has enough within it that it will just keep a fire going. And so, yeah, those same battery components are also tied to our solar batteries and all of that. So, as a huge proponent for sustainable energy sources and renewable energy, that was something that will plague me for at least a couple months until I figure out an answer. But there's all these trade-offs. So that's part of what we're looking at across the county is how do we move into the future with this growth, knowing that, we can't just put wind farms everywhere. There's trade-offs to all this stuff. So that's a huge conversation that we're having for the next 2 to 3 years as we're looking at that. Workforce development. As I said, we have an internal and an external goal. Internally, we want to fill vacancies, retain our staff, and make feel engaged. We'll be implementing a lot of that DEI work internally. Collective bargaining, that was something that we're looking at. The rules and regs from the state on that will get finalized. I think it all goes live July 1st. We've been weighing in. The county, it very much sees this as a choose your own adventure. This is about self-determination for our employees. And we have been actually applauded by AFSCME, which is the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, for our communications on that, of being very neutral and letting people know, look, this is a decision for you to make. Whether you choose to organize and unionize or not is entirely up to you, and your employment will not be impacted whether you're for or against. That's totally up to you. We have been meeting with AFSCME. We weighed in on the rules. One of the comments that we weighed in on was about regularity and uniformity in the processes. So as I mentioned, I come from the election law side, and so looking at, when do I get my ballot? When do I have to turn it in? What information will be on there? So that is all uniform, I believe helps both parties with their expectations. So we've been weighing in on that mainly from a process standpoint, and then we're gearing up for that, and we'll see what our employees decide. I think there's a lot of reasons. I was a union member for the Political Workers Guild, and believe that there's great advocacy that can happen there, and that you may choose to be part of a union even when your employer is a rock star, right? And we feel like, I said that we take care of our employees well, but there's a lot of things in that collective voice that may be needed. And so we'll see what our employees choose, and we'll go through that. And that process can take like 2 years, 1 or 2, 3 years, right? So things might get started, but to actually come to that collective bargaining agreement may take a while. So that'll be a process. Salaries and wages, again, we're looking to be competitive to make sure that we are appropriately compensating folks, because as we know, by and large, the wages have not kept up with the cost of living, and we want our employees and staff to be able to focus at their work and to feel taken care of, and to feel, not just feel appreciated, but be actually appreciated in the value of the work that they give. We believe that it is something that is not just something we want our businesses in the county to do, but something that we believe is important to live by, model by experience, and live, I'm missing the phrase there, but model through good practices. Basically, not be hypocrites. So we recently approved an infant at work policy. So I think the babies have to be, they can't be walking yet, so you're not going to lose one in the hallway. So they can't be mobile, but this is a way to allow our employees to kind of get back to work faster if they want to do that, if that works for them financially. There is kind of a financial benefit to that. But also, part of why I supported it was because I believe it creates a stronger community for those infants also. That you now have kids who have a whole team of people who have seen them since they were a baby, right? And that's going to increase that child's support network for the rest of their lives. Dual language policy. So if you speak another language, we are changing our policy so that there are 3 different tiers. One is if you use a second language more than 30% of the time. Tier 2 is kind of up to 30%, and then tier 1 is kind of ad hoc. It's like we recognize there's a general benefit to you knowing this language, and you may not use it all the time in your particular role, but somebody knowing Arabic, or a particular dialect of Chinese or something may be very relevant. If we've got somebody on the phone, we know that there's over 164 languages spoken in this county. And so we recognize that benefit, and it's something that we've passed. I'm very proud of that as somebody who used to teach English as a second language, being able to honor people's understanding that English isn't the end-all, be-all. It is, yes, our main common denominator here, but recognizing the value of people being able to speak different languages, whether it's tied to that particular role or not, is something I'm very proud of us for doing. External is we want to raise the average income of those in our county, especially those under the 100% AMI. We kind of just threw it out there. We haven't pinned that down more, but we were like, what if we just said, this is our goal? What can we do to raise incomes, right? Because that is ultimately eviction prevention, right? Arapahoe Douglas Works is incredible. We're working out how we can support them more in their work, but then looking at economic development, how we're supporting small local businesses, but then also diversifying the businesses that we're trying to attract, right? And being intentional about what kinds of employers, what kind of jobs they're offering. Are they hiring locally? Are they bringing in jobs that will be relevant in the next 5, 10, 15 years? Or are these industries that are kind of going to the wayside? And so really looking at how we can get people into jobs that pay them well, treat them well as increasing certification, training, and all of that. One thing that's very interesting, we've got 2 different AD Works offices. One on Lima Plaza, where we've got the DMV, Public Works and Development, Open Spaces, and then one more in Aurora. And I asked about the kind of demographic of folks they're seeing here at the office in Centennial. And it's that kind of 45 to 55 people who are age group who need to sort of retrain for jobs. And that's huge when you're thinking about people are living longer, going longer, the cost of living, the economy and industry and jobs are changing so rapidly. And so I thought that was very interesting, and there's no shame in that game, is that it's not just for, indigent people who can't, I failed out of school or I did la 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 la. It's really for a whole swath of folks, And they also work with small businesses to get folks to come in and say, hey, we can help with your, RFP or we can help with the alert or the notice that you're putting out there for a job, so that you're connecting with people, and here's how you can advertise. And so really creating a nice positive feedback loop there that feeds into itself. That's that. Next one is increasing revenue. So as I said, we just had earlier this, I think it was Monday. No, I think it was Tuesday. We had a budget conversation with the board. I sit on the EBC, so I get to have multiple budget conversations and the inside track, but we had it as the whole board. And we're looking at just straight off the bat for 2024, a 3.4, but it's projection, so we're calling it $3 million, but a $3 million deficit just straight off the bat. And that's a really tough place to be. We will barely be able to do our merit and market increases for total comp and for salaries. If we did that, we basically can't do anything else, really. And I think that's kind of factored into this, but that's also, obviously our current budget isn't even covering that. We are unable to keep up with our aging, our infrastructure needs. I wrote an op-ed kind of letter to the editor kind of thing on the ever exciting topic of aging infrastructure. I'm sure you all read it. I know it's really fascinating. But that's the kind of stuff that I get into, So we try to have all of our roads at an 80% scorecard on all of our roads, 80% of our roads in the green, right? And that doesn't mean they're all perfect, but that means they're doing pretty good, right? We're now at, I think, like in the 40%, Director Weimer? Is it 40%? 50%? I forgot. Lower than 60. Okay, 58% are green. So obviously we're falling below our own standards, and our road and bridge crew has been doing everything they can. There's this really great, if we want to do this for a future topic, we can really get into the roads. But there's this really interesting chart that really helped elucidate it for me, is that once you get, so when, there's initial cracks, you can do kind of, as things start to fail, there's kind of easy fixes that will get you back up to the top, but those are just Band-Aids, right? And they're meant to be Band-Aids for a certain point, but once you start to deteriorate so much, there's no amount of Band-Aids in the world that are going to get you back up to the infrastructure, the level of quality of road that you really need. And what's happening is we're having a larger number of our roads are getting into that point of no return. And so effectively so our road and bridge fund gets, projects get $6 million annually from our general fund. That's kind of just slated out. On top of that $6 million, we need about another 12 to 13 million per year for the next 19 years to actually catch up, right? So we're looking at other ways to do that, and our road and bridge crew is amazing at kind of strategizing how do we fix stuff and putting those Band-Aids on. But that's just a little picture of where we are there, right? If you look at, okay, we want to decrease single occupancy vehicles, cool, but buses and bus rapid transit, some of those things actually have a more wear and tear on our roads, right? So there's a lot that goes into that. Second, our ARPA funds are ending. And so programs like our eviction prevention program and some of our mental health programs that we've been able to put in effect in the last couple years to respond to the need in our community will go by the wayside if we cannot find something. So what we are looking at is, it's amazing that for a county who gets a lot of our 50% of our funds from grants. Now, we did say the difference between competitive grants and then some that are just allocated. We don't have a single full-time employee that just works on grants, which is wild, right? So we're looking at that, and we're looking at how we can, is it a writer? Because one writer can't write for 12 different departments and 6 different offices, right? So we're thinking about a coordinator or a researcher. We're looking at what that will be. We'll go into a strategic process about that so that we can continue to get dollars in. looking at county property for revenue generation. We do have some county property. Maybe we can rent it out to small businesses, do a co-op, do an incubator, or for other clinics and different things that we can then get money from renting out that space. Maybe even selling some property off if it gets that bad. But again, those will still be one-time dollars, and we're not really fixing the problem long term. It'll just be so that we can keep some critical services going. There's also some, especially in PWD, some ideas about how do we get growth to pay for itself. And so not only what we require of developers when they're kind of building a new development, but also if we need something that kind of an overlay or a district kind of just to do dollars just for a specific area that would be residential. Given that we have a housing crisis and housing's very expensive and all of that, that's not my favorite option, but it's something that we might have to look at, right? If we get to a point where we don't have the funds to pay for those basic services ourselves out of what the dollars that we already have now. And then the other thing is we're exploring ballot measures. Maybe we put something on the ballot. So as we know in Colorado, government doesn't raise taxes. People raise taxes. And sometimes that's an initiative that's resident-led, and then we put that on the ballot. And then sometimes it's referred, and it comes from the government saying, hi, guys, we need more money to do these things that you want us to do. So we are exploring that for this fall. That decision will be made July-August timeline. But it's something I think we want to have roads. We've done polls to see what people really care about, what the needs are. And we know that keeping up our infrastructure. And that's not even moving towards bikeability, walkability, and EV infrastructure minus the burning batteries, right? It freaked me out, you guys. It really freaked me out. I'm going to be thinking about it for a long time. But it's so just keeping up with things, not to mention moving forward, right? The other piece of that we heard needs from the community are public safety, health, mental health, taking care of our unhoused neighbors and really doing those services that keep people moving forward. And so that's something that we will be looking at, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I think that's the last one of these. So are there any questions on county priorities and foci? No? All right, we'll keep trucking. Great. Okay, state legislative session and advocacy. So, as I noted there, CCI and CCAT. These are two organizations so CCI is every county in the state. CCAT is a blue county organization. So this is official, but it's politics. So I'm just these are partisan offices, and across the state, county commissioners have traditionally been Republican. This county just flipped from a Republican majority to a Democratic majority in 2020. With my election, I flipped my seat for the first time, and now we have 4-1. At CCI, every county gets a vote. When you're voting on policy, every county gets a vote. So we are kind of left blue counties, even though sometimes it's roads or roads, but sometimes even funding kind of sources can have a partisan difference, right, of how we approach things. Sometimes it's not what, but how, right? And then sometimes it's the what, right? With that one county, every vote thing, blue counties get outvoted quite a bit by our Republican friends. And sometimes we have a lot of alignment because it is a local government issue, right? But some blue counties who were blue before Arapahoe turned blue got very annoyed with that situation and the lack of voice and power within CCI, and they created CCAT. And so CCAT is counties and commissioners acting together. So you can join as a county, you can join as an individual commissioner. But these are the two orgs that we work with during the legislative session and then after session, but to advocate for us at the state. So Bowditch and Castle are our lobbyists. So we have lobbyists through CCI, lobbyists through CCAT, and then the county has our own lobbyists because sometimes we don't agree with anybody else. We're just like, this is what our opinion is. And then there are department-specific associations as well. We also participate in things like Dr. Cog. Commissioner Baker is an officer with Dr. Cog, and Commissioner Summy is a alternate on that. And so there's all these different consortiums and groups that then advocate at the state legislative during session. As I've said, our relationship between the state is they make policy that then we implement, and as they adjust budgets, they want us to focus more over here. They want this to happen. They want that to happen. We aren't different teams. We are just different members of the same team. And I think there has been a sort of interesting relationship between our state legislators and our county commissioners, and it's something that we've really been working on this year to get into better teamwork so that our delegation from Arapahoe is more in sync with what we're doing at the county and what our needs are. And so we've already sent out an invite and a link to our state legislators of like, hey, once you guys sleep for a couple months, very well-deserved rest, what do you want to know about the county? Do you want to tour human services? Do you want to tour open spaces? What kind of information do you want? Because they may be working on bills that we don't know about yet. But then also a lunch and a kind of workshop of, hey, what are our needs in the county? What are we seeing? And where could you run legislation for us that will help us do our job that you want us to do better, right? So that's different, and we've done different things in the past, but I'm feeling very hopeful about that and very excited. We've got legislators who've already filled out that survey of saying kind of what time and things they'll go through. Rep. Dixon is one of the representatives from my district. Both Rep. Dixon and Rep. Hamrick have been very, and Rep. Ortiz, a lot of our reps have been very engaged in asking the county for our opinions on, hey, would this work for you guys? Does this not? What does this bill look like? What does this impact? How about that? And very excited to keep working on and building those relationships with our legislators. We also had legislators reach out and say, hey, I need your support on this, and so fostering those relationships is really important. Senator Bridges, Senator Kolker, Senator Sullivan, a lot of them really reached out. Senator Fields, honestly, we have such a rock star group of legislators. And I was previously chief of staff to Rep. Judah, who's from Aurora. And so I'm very excited to kind of get back in and work with them on that stuff this summer, late summer, early fall. That's kind of our approach and strategy is what I mean by that, of kind of being more proactive. And then that summer education and workshops is what we're doing there. Here's some information on particular bills that we weighed in on. And I'm going to go to my notes because while I remember a lot, I don't want to mess up what some of these are. And they started flying quite quickly at a certain point. So relative kin and placement of child. So this was affecting our Human Services Department. And we were in amend position. So the county can take... there's 4 different positions you can take, and then we created some sub positions because I like to make things more complicated than they need to be. But all of this is made up. You just got to make it work for you, right? So you can support, you can amend, you can monitor, or you can oppose, or you can just not have a position, okay? So the county, how we've taken things, amend usually means we want to stay at the table and make sure that this works for us, A lot of times with our legislators, we've seen that the policy, we are aligned in terms of the policy, but they're not thinking through the implementation. And that's where that dialogue between the state legislators and the county is so critical because we're the ones really on the ground implementing the programs, right? So a lot of things like, so this was establish several measures that protect the best interests of a child or youth that will not hinder reunification with a child's family after being temporarily placed outside the home. So they were looking at kind of when Human Services is looking at placement of a child outside of their home, they have this list of who they consider and what that looks like. And so this was adjusting that. I am not the Human Services expert, so if someone is interested in really what that is, you can, first of all, go to the Colorado General Assembly website and just look up the bill number and it'll be there. Or we can get you in touch with somebody from Human Services to get a little more expert explanation on that. But that was really big. Parent and family time, we were also in an amend position, and that was really looking at fostering time when a child is placed outside of the home, really fostering engagement in that time so that there's not a breakdown in the relationship while we're trying to improve parenting outcomes and make sure that the home is safe for the child. A lot of times those programs, while very well intended to keep kids safe, can really harm relationships between children and parents. And so they were looking at that. But for us, on the implementation side, we're looking at, oh man, well that's more FTEs, that's scheduling, what room are we going to do it? So we look at that, and so we're in an amend to get some of those kind of implementation thoughts covered. Human Resources was a big one. Power Act. This updated the definition of harassment in the workplace in order to bring a case and have it be qualified as, okay, this was sufficient unfair workplace practices based on harassment in the workplace. It had to be both. It had to be severe or pervasive. This bill changed that to a totality of the circumstances standard, and looking at and acknowledging that sometimes one incident is enough, and that is more reflective of what real workplace situations can be. And I will say this is something that I advocated for very heavily. I started working when I was 15 and have worked as a hostess, server, bartender, English teacher, TA, attorney, political consultant, and I have been sexually harassed in every workplace I've ever been in. And so not just for myself as a person, but I think as for the county, it was important for us to be a model and to lead with leadership of that as an employer, but then also not be a hypocrite in terms of what we want to see other employers do, right? And we want to make sure that employees across Arapahoe County feel safe and have dignity in the workplace and do not have to submit to that kind of treatment in order to pay the bills, right? So that was huge there. And then land use, you might have heard of a little bill called SB 23-213. This this got amended and then ended up dying. But the Arapahoe County was in an amend position on this. As I said, we were looking at updating our land use codes anyway. Originally, this bill would have been very prescriptive and overridden a lot of local land use decision-making abilities. While we recognize that there are a lot of harmful policies, that zoning has been weaponized, that redlining has excluded people, and there's been a lot of poor decisions made in the past of how people relate to each other. While we want to rectify that in the county, we still believed that local jurisdictions have the best picture on what's happening in the ground. And so our amend position was more of, let's get these processes lined up. If we're doing studies and plans, let's make sure that's all flowing and that the state isn't interrupting the good work that is happening in a lot of areas. But then also that decisions are being made at the right place, right? I think a statewide strategy for land use makes sense, for it to incorporate water, ag, all of those things, transportation, it makes sense. But the ultimate decision making should come down to local areas of how we are going to meet those goals or meet that strategy. And so we were in amend on that. It was like a friendly amend of just like, we kind of know what we're doing here, like we get it, but like let's be more teammates in this as opposed to you guys just telling us what to do, you know. So interested to see what comes back from that. But obviously, as I laid out earlier, we're already making a lot of those changes that were brought up in that bill anyway. So that was huge. Regulating local housing growth restrictions was one of, there are some jurisdictions in the state that have growth caps, basically. When you have a growth cap here, that forces the market to somewhere nearby and can then inflate the cost of housing, the demand and then the cost of housing in a separate jurisdiction. So this was, I think we were in amend on this just to clarify that it didn't mean that we couldn't look at growth restrictions on particular industries. Because we might want to restrict the growth of certain industries, but not necessarily housing, right? And so we were in amend on that. We were cool with that. Housing, low-income housing property addiction, affordable housing right of first refusal, Prop 123. These were all measures, especially the last two, of looking at the tools that we have to engage either in the housing market or get funds that will help us build affordable housing and get more affordable or attainable housing created in the county. Taxation, reducing property taxes, voter-approved revenue. Okay, so these two things, this was, I don't know how nerdy you all are. You're here, so there's a certain baseline. But at the end of session, a whole bunch of stuff started coming through. So we had some property valuations went out, 30, 40%, 60% in some jurisdictions in the mountain areas, people freaking out. And the legislature felt like, okay, we got to do something to right-size this so people aren't losing their homes, right? So these are two things that went through. And honestly, I'll be very honest, I kind of lost some of the details at the end. But they basically there will be a measure going on to the ballot in November that kind of looks at capping the increase of revenue, how we get money back to people, and all of that. And basically just looking at how we can stabilize those property taxes. Because we used to, in Colorado, have both Tabor, so there was Tabor and Gallagher. And Gallagher kind of created this ratio where property tax valuations, commercial and residential, had to stay in a 55 to 45% ratio. Removing the Gallagher amendment and repealing that meant that residential can go kind of all over the place, right? There's not that tied ratio. And so that's why we see a lot of these crazy skyrocketing valuations. How we fix for that is these ideas. So it's an attempt at that. I don't have all the details off the top of my head because there's a couple different measures in there. I think part of it is like a straight up $50,000 or something comes off your valuation kind of thing like that. So that just kind of right sizes it easily. But that will be on the ballot, and we'll talk about that, and I'll have more information on that as we get closer to November and voting time so that we can make educated decisions on that. So any questions about state leg session and either what we do or any other bills that you all saw come through that you're interested in what the county thought about that or worked on? They are, they're through our lobbyists. They register, and so there's a portal. Yeah, so they're all public on what we're supporting or not. I will say also, if you see, going forward in the next session, if you all see bills going through and it relates to the county and you're kind of like, what's the county doing? Feel free to email me or your other commissioners if you don't happen to live in my district, but and see what we're taking on. You can advocate to us to advocate for you, so that's something that we're looking at. Okay, our final section is district update, specifically for this, doing a little time check, and I'm actually on time, so woohoo. So, it is a lot, yeah, but there was, moving forward, town halls will be like an hour and a half, but as I said, there was a lot, and so I wanted to kind of start with just get all the information out here to begin with. So, Centennial Airport, okay, so, if you live north of Arapahoe, in between I-25 and Havana, you may have noticed an increase of flights over your neighborhood. And when I say may, Tom would be laughing if he was still here, because through a series of events, which I won't get into, but touch and go traffic, in particular training flights, are being pushed north of Arapahoe Road. And these flight schools are touch and goes. They literally are in these little prop planes just going, departing and landing, just touch and go, round and around and around and around and around. And these prop planes, it's, when you're taking off, those engines are louder, and so they're getting increased speed and sound. And these planes have been they're very, very, very loud. Sia, thanks for coming. Very loud over people's neighborhoods. And so constituents are very rightly sort of getting freaked out and frustrated with the impact on their quality of life. We used to, this is my husband and kid Oliver. Thanks for being here. We used to live at Arapahoe and Dayton in the Copper Terrace apartments from 2013 to 2018. And I have racked my mind. I don't remember airplanes or being bothered by it or annoyed by it ever. And so when you have dozens and dozens of residents coming to airport authority board meetings and noise roundtable meetings, it really means something is wrong. And so what's important here is the county has geared up our response. So as I mentioned earlier, I did not study airport law. So for me, personally, I'm trying to find as much time as possible to study airport law and figure out what the county's authority is, what the airport authority board's authority is, vis-a-vis the FAA, which controls the sky, right? So that's been huge. The county has written letters to the FAA. We are coordinating with Greenwood Village, Congressman Crow's office, Senator Hickenlooper's office, and their staff, and in regular communication with them. I don't text with Senator Hickenlooper, but Congressman Crow and I have been like, okay, we got to figure this out, So we're getting all synced up there. We have also, in conjunction with the airport, hired a lobbyist, the Normandy Group, which has done a lot of great work, to have what we're going to call is constructive persistence on getting things through the federal level and changes through the FAA to make sure those flights get south of Arapahoe Road again. There's a couple different mechanisms that we can do. If anybody ever wants to really get in the weeds on this, we can do it. I can cover it more in a future town hall if we want. Just let me know. But basically, the county is doing what it can to push the FAA to make a path correction. Lakeview Cell Tower. So if you live at Peoria and north of Arapahoe and around Orchard, there is a real lack of cell phone service up there. Not for T-Mobile, apparently, but for Verizon and others. That's how it is. So we had members of the Cherry Creek Vista Park Board and then Planning Commission kind of work to get a cell phone tower located around Lakeview Park. I think that's the park name. I don't remember exactly. But the Lakeview Cell Tower is what we're calling the project. So some neighbors are not so excited about the cell phone tower being literally in their backyard. It would be very, very close. This would be a 5G cell tower, and they need the plans currently to create the level of service to address the needs that spurred this project. It has to be 65 feet. So currently in this park, there is one that is about 40 to 45 feet. It's a flagpole. It blends in. It's like, yay, America, here by the ballpark and all of that, right? Totally looks normal. It's shorter than the trees. It's tucked in there. It looks normal. Where this is proposed to go would be 65 feet. It's taller than everything around. And because they have to set it back enough from the houses so that if it falls, it doesn't fall onto a house, it is in this very awkward kind of middle place, just right there. And one of the requirements that the cell phone tower implementation, and Crown Castle's the company, and they're, I've nothing to say really about them except for they're just the applicant, so I have to talk about them. One of the standards that they have to meet is the CRMS, which is something like the radio something. I'm slightly irrelevant. But they have to conceal the structure. And so there's a question as to whether this structure, even though it kind of looks like a tree, and it doesn't have to look exactly like a tree, right? But whether it is concealed or not. And so that is sitting for an administrative review once we get an application resubmittal and the next phases from the applicant. That'll be an administrative decision that our our Public Works and Development Planning Division will be able to make that determination. And we'll see what works. You know, I think for me as the representative, I want my folks, like, especially when you think about school shootings and kind of dark, sad reality that we live in, there are schools around there that really don't have great cell service. So even if this particular application gets denied, there are other options there. And I know that park board, they recently had elections, and the new members of the park board obviously live in that district and are interested in having cell service. And so they've got some ideas, if this doesn't get approved, of how we can get that fixed and still get cell service, but maybe not have a 65-foot tree that may or may not blend in. I don't know. I don't make that determination. So oil and gas regulations, as we said, so some people may have heard of the Lowry Cap project. There was 174 wells proposed to go by the Aurora Reservoir. Neighbors, rightly, appropriately, I would kind of go like, whoa, this feels very close to my home. So they started firing up some conversations. Simultaneously, our Public Works Department was looking at, okay, if we know we've got some applications that might be submitted, we also know there have been some updates needed from the fire district, some technology, kind of expanded on some of that. And as I said earlier in the conversation, are looking at monitoring for air and water monitoring, alert systems based on spills and leaks, financial assurances to make sure that if something does go wrong at a site, that our residents aren't footing the bill, basically, for those operations. We've looked at some other things we talked about are neighborhood notices and meetings, making sure that our constituents have proper notice of any development kind of thing. But really what we're looking at are value add, strengthening protections for our human health and the environment. And we are, because of a kind of evolution of how this has all evolved, we basically have 6 months. I can go into the weeds on how we have 6 months, but we have 6 months basically to get through some of our updates and for our applicants to be obligated to any updates. So that's where we'll really be looking is where technological updates, what physical updates, what requirements can we make to strengthen our regs so that we are rightly and positively protecting our human health and the environment. That said, we also know that the state is looking at air and water quality protections. And so those might extend past the 6 months, but we'll be folding those into this process as well. And basically, we want to make sure that if these operations are happening in our county, that our people and our environment are taken care of. Dove Valley Regional Park, so it's a huge park over on the east of 25, and it's a $18 million project. They started phase 1 in March, and they are updating the fields, making it a little more environmentally friendly in some of the stuff. But it will be huge amenities. It's an 18-month project, should be done by summer of 2024. If anybody is a huge Dove Valley Park trip person, I can go into greater detail, but not seeing eyes perking up about that. Okay. Other notes, so the end of PHE is the public health emergency that was related to Rona. So 2 important things about that. We have when you're on Medicaid, you have to do regular redeterminations. During COVID, anybody who got approved for Medicaid during Rona didn't have to have a redetermination. People were just kept in. With the ending of the public health emergency, all of those folks, which is about 50,000 people or families in Arapahoe County, have to be redetermined. So the state has allocated funds for temporary staff for human services to beef up staffing to do those redeterminations. The other piece is SNAP will also be redetermined. So this gives me heartache because I know people who, what we call it is the cliff effect in some of these programs is it's the thing of, okay, you make $19,999 and you qualify for $5,000 of benefits and safety net support. You make $20,000 and now, right. And so that's that cliff effect. So Rep. Judah worked with Rep. Duran on a bill in 2022 session to soften that cliff effect in some ways. However, there's going to be people who aren't doing much better than they were doing just a couple months ago who are going to lose their SNAP and Medicaid benefits, which is really tough. One alert that I want to give to folks is that if you know people who are on Medicaid and might lose their determination, make very certain that when they go to Google and they're like, all right, health insurance or the health insurance market, that they're clicking and filling out information only on Connect for Health or the Colorado government sites. Because what's been happening is people are Googling, and then obviously Google, you can buy ads, and so you get bumped up. They click on the first thing they see, they submit the information, and then they just, in their health insurance brokers are just calling them non-stop. I had a friend who posted it on social media, and that's where I was like, whoa. And so we looked into it and dug into it, and it was a private site that she'd given her information on, and frankly, to me, it's predatory. It is harassment. I have flagged it for our human services. I've flagged it for Rep. Judah, who has done a lot of work with HCPF, which is the state department in charge of Medicaid and healthcare policy and all of that. I don't know what we can do in terms of, if there's appetite for an administrative action on that, but it's right now where we're at is just trying to make sure people know just to click on those government sites because they will come after you. They will come for you. And try to get your health insurance business, which is really messed up, but that's our society sometimes, so that's a huge thing. Property valuations, obviously talked about that. You can go to the assessor's site right at the top. I think it's the second full sentence has a link to how to protest your property valuation. Assessor Kaiser has been incredibly forthright and is really understands the pain that this causes for people. They've done in-community visits as well, and I think one of them is today, and then I think there's another one too. So on that website, if you want something in person or if that might be helpful for somebody, please send them to that. And then this is upcoming county events. We've got a lot of really fun stuff happening. State of the County is June 7th. It's in the AM at the fairgrounds. So not everybody's favorite time to come hang out, but it is, I think it's great. I'm excited. I've been in the past. I'm excited to now share with folks, our needs and challenges, but also all the incredible work we've been doing. Public Works Play Date is super cool. I've been promised that there will be a baby snowplow there, which is super fun. That's an inside joke because we were in one of the, I mentioned that we've got directors who've been giving us extra tutoring sessions. One of the sessions I wanted to look at was impact fees. So road impact fees, oil and gas impact fees, and we were talking about how we charge for the development of lanes and all of that, and bike lanes, and I made a joke about are our bike lanes protected? And then there was a response about, well, okay, but how do you have a snow plow? You know, how do you plow for the snow with a protected bike lane? And then the other response was a baby snow plow. And then that has just stuck in my head as just an endearing and adorable idea. And then you combine that with the infant at work policy, and we've got, see, thank you, you're getting there. Thank you. So there may not be babies on baby snowplows at the Public Works date, but there will be, you know, our trucks and all the kind of cool equipment and stuff. And so if you've got people who are interested in that, it should be a good time. Our Public Works and Development crew is awesome, very cool people. And so, is that you're saying we should go? This is how my husband and I have dates now. Is we do stuff like that. So. Anyway, County Fair is July, Pictures on the Plains, and then Veterans Stand Down event. So a lot of stuff happening this summer. We've got stuff going on all the time, and so hope people will be engaged. Here is, I can do questions on just district stuff. Yeah. Yes.
I have multiple questions. First one is
Hi.
the airport. So I live like quarter mile from the Centennial.
Okay.
So earlier there was so many open space, but now Apex they do a lot of apartments there. Even though changing the routes will help.
So what we're looking at for changing the routes is it's a cloverleaf pattern, and what it would do is they would turn at the numbers, but it would, instead of having a kind of a loop that's, we'll call it vertical, it would be more horizontal and push out so that it would go over to the west to the highway. Because if you look at where the airport is, it's all just car dealerships and restaurants until the highway from the airport. And so it would loop that way and back around so it wouldn't affect residents.
Because that area has like Amazon's warehouse and USPS and beside two corporates. And now the empty places all are under housing under Apex.
I know.
They already said 470 West. They already built a huge big community and it's already rented out.
I know.
There's also going.
Yeah.
Buildings, so I don't know how much that will help.
Yeah, well, we think by pushing it west to the highway so that it kind of loops around there will help avoid those residences. Yeah, and there's been an interesting conversation around, okay, well, you guys moved by where an airport is, but you've got people who've lived there for 20, 30 years who are like, yeah, well, I've been here while the airport's been here and the planes have not been over my neighborhood. So we got to fix it. So, and I know Centennial's got developments going in around the airport. Douglas County has moved north up to develop in some of that area too. So it's interesting. It's a very interesting issue because I think it's some people point to the fact that it brings $2.1 billion into our local economy. People talk about that it's been huge for local mass businesses, the Broncos, different stuff. It's cool. I mean, a lot of really cool stuff happens there. I did an onboarding and did a tour. They're building Firehawks there, which is where they're turning Black Hawk helicopters to have bay doors where they can drop, first of all, suck up, but then drop massive gallons of water to fight fires. So they're doing really cool stuff there, but we need to find an answer that doesn't impinge on people's quality of life, you know? So, and yeah, there's so much residential growth. One of the conversation pieces from some residents is, look, does it not seem inevitable that the airport's going to move? Why don't we just start that process now? Other people feel like it's not necessarily inevitable, right? And so right now what we're doing is we're looking for a solution to get those planes from really harming people's quality of life, because I mean, it's beautiful weather, and when it's beautiful weather, the pilots want to train. And so there's this people are really their quality of life is really being impacted. But yeah, we're in our solving of this problem, we're not just going to trade one residential community for another. So that's why we think, hopefully making it go a little more west towards the highway, towards 25, is there's not a lot of residential there. It's all commercial and stuff. So we can do that and have them come back is the plan. We'll see. The FAA has to accept the plan. I mean, there's a lot of steps to it. But yeah, we're working on it. Yeah.
After the redistricting,
Mhm.
still like Lincoln and Chambers is under rural area or
So I looked at the maps when they were initially proposed. I haven't looked to see if the redistricting commission has issued new maps based on the feedback they got at the public town halls. But I don't know what will be my district or not.
like Chambers has huge issues with like T-Mobile, AT&T.
Uh huh.
From Lincoln to from Lincoln to make a turn on Chambers.
Uh huh.
To like I would say East Main Street,
Uh huh.
there is like huge issue with like AT&T and T-Mobile. No network.
No cell service for AT&T and T-Mobile.
Yeah, I drive that road like almost every day.
That Lincoln and Chambers, I think will probably stay in my. That's by Lima, Peoria, all that kind of stuff, south of Arepo.
No. It's like
Oh, you mean like Lincoln, like down Lincoln. Oh, well, south of county line is Dougco, but yeah, but north of county line, that area. I mean, they didn't change the districts so much in the proposed maps. They didn't change the districts so much that will be totally shifted around. It's kind of just about where the finer points on the edges are. So I will probably, unless I get particularly districted out, I will stay in the same area, Centennial, Greenwood Village area. Yeah, but south of county line is Douglas County. Yeah, but we can put you in contact with somebody, a Douglas County commissioner, to talk about that. Okay.
and another thing is that Koelbel Regional Park.
Yeah.
So I'm one of the South Asian leaders
Uh huh.
in Colorado.
Yep.
And, like a lot of people lives, like South Asian people lives, they bought a house, like huge community out there.
Uh huh.
So and they're more into cricket than soccer.
Mhm.
So is there any way, because Koelbel Regional Park is a big park, I was there.
Uh huh.
Is there any way we can get a cricket field there? Because a lot of time we drive like Thornton, Green Valley Ranch, far
Uh
to play cricket. So
huh. Okay.
there is a way we can, because we have been talking with Park and Recreation, but last budget we didn't know.
Okay.
So since you said like the work, like construction will be
Yeah. The plan. So I mean, unfortunately, the plan has already been made, and they're already doing that. But it's something that we can look at. Our open spaces is the only, I think, sales tax that we actually do have in Arapahoe goes to our open spaces, our parks and recs. And so if not at Dove Valley, and I don't know what all is entailed in cricket. That's one sport I've not ever gotten into, but
we were looking for like we just need
a concrete pitch.
that there's a 15 feet.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then, like linear is okay.
Okay. Yeah, totally. And I will say that leads us to this. And so this is social for Arapahoe and for me in particular. I will say full disclosure that unlike Congress, we don't have to have separate accounts for campaign and official. Our terms are 4 years. I may put something more political there because I don't have to separate them, but I try to keep my stuff pretty official. And if I'm saying something personal, I'll say that. But follow the county, follow me if you want. And then this is my email. And so if you want to email me and say, hey, how can we get upstream in this conversation on a cricket pitch? Would be cool. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, cool. Any other questions or anything? Okay. Nothing online? No? Probably nobody even on. There are? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. I also would be remiss if I did not say that it is my father's birthday today. And he is, I don't know if I would have gotten into government and politics without him, but he did run for office when I was 7. And I genuinely I'm kind of torn. I kind of hope he's listening, but I also hope that he's having a good time. But, you know, he's my dad and it's his birthday. So just in case he is listening or somebody else, happy birthday. And thank you all. And then we will get, Chris, do we already have the schedule? Did we pin down the actual dates for my next town halls? Just roundabout. Okay. So I'll be looking at doing these quarterly. I will also say we didn't put it on county events, but tomorrow night is a county telephone town hall. And we dial out, but you can also dial in, and that information is on our Twitter at Arapahoe County. I'll share it tomorrow morning or something. We'll be doing a deeper dive on the budget in particular and kind of some of our struggles and what we've been trying to do. And I hope that everyone had a good time, and thanks for being here. Yeah, that's it. All right. Thank you.